Lamar Jackson is the Fantasy Pros consensus ranking quarterback 3. Now, looking at what Lamar Jackson has done this year, he is the quarterback 5 in fantasy points per game. He's the quarterback 4 in total fantasy points. He's averaging 23 fantasy points per game. And looking at his game log, right, he had his worst game of the season fantasy points wise this past week against Cleveland. Only 16 pass attempts, 7.5 yards per attempt, only 120 passing yards. He had no passing touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns. This was an anomaly game, frankly, for Lamar Jackson. And that's what happens when Mark Andrews is hurt. Rashad Bateman's first game back from injury. And, I think better days are ahead. Reality is Tampa Bay is middle of the pass against passing quarterbacks. They're 16th right now in quarterback points allowed on the season. But they're a little tougher matchup against running quarterbacks. They are 22nd in quarterback points allowed from rushing. Now, this game total is pretty interesting. This is the fifth highest game on the slate of the Thursday to Monday night games, 45.5 implied points. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 1-point favorites in this game. So I think it's going to be pretty close because Tampa at home. The over-under for Lamar Jackson is 213.5 passing yards, 1.5 passing touchdowns per Roto Grinders. But looking at what Lamar Jackson did at the beginning of the season, quarterback 8, quarterback 1, but he hasn't finished as quarterback 10 each of the past 4 weeks. So I am a little hesitant to give Lamar Jackson this high of a ranking, given that, well, two things. It's not like one of the top 2 or 3 games of the week. Number one. Number two, Mark Andrews is struggling with the injury. 3, Rashad Bateman, even when he was out there, was not running, more than 75% of the routes. So I am concerned about that. It is a relatively tough rushing defense, but last week it seemed pretty exposed against Donta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. Okay. So, yes, Lamar Jackson, quarterback 3. If I'm doing rankings for tomorrow, and I'm going to finalize rankings for tomorrow, I'm going to probably be at quarterback 3 or lower, right? There's no reason to think Lamar Jackson is the quarterback 2 or higher. He's going to be, I think Mark Andrews, he hasn't practiced all week. I'll talk more about Andrews later on in the live stream, but Lamar Jackson hasn't gone over 80 rushing yards each of the last 4 weeks. And you're thinking 80 rushing yards, that's a pretty high bar. But he had 107 rushing yards 2 of the first 3 games of the season, and he was hitting on all cylinders. Now with the Mark Andrews struggles, with the rest of the wide receivers, right, pretty much it's Rashad Bateman or bust. It's not like Devin Duvernay has really stepped into a massive role that's helped elevate Lamar Jackson on a passing, from a passing perspective. In fact, over the last 4 games, Lamar Jackson has not had more than 210 passing yards. And he's struggled with completing passes even over the last 3. Less than 60% of his passes have been complete since week 5. So there are reasons to be skeptical of Lamar Jackson hitting a ceiling game this week. I'm probably going to rank him a little lower. And looking at like the range of rankers, because that's another thing too, is like, what are my peers saying? I have Lamar right now as a placeholder for quarterback 4. He's consensus quarterback 3, but his rankings range all the way from quarterback 2 to quarterback 9. And I think that, probably this quarterback 5 to 6 range is going to be the right spot for putting Lamar Jackson in the rankings, at least compared to my peers. But I would not be surprised once again on a short week without Mark Andrews practicing much and Rashad Bateman still struggling to come back from this injury. There are not really reasons to be optimistic about Lamar Jackson hitting a ceiling week this week.